Hey everyone, welcome to Be Good Farm. My name is Heather, and today I'm going to be talking about seed starting supplies. I'm going to be talking about the things that you would need for starting in trays or cups and what you would need for soil blocking. There's a lot of different ways that you could do this. You could just go to the big box stores and get those 72 cell Jiffy trays with the little pucks with the peat moss in it. You know, the ones that you soak in the water and they expand inside and they have the little netting around that. I did that my first year that I ever started any seeds and it worked okay. But the only problem with that is that that's pure peat moss. It dries out very quickly. It doesn't have any nutrition in it. And that little netting that you have around your seedlings, you need to peel that off. And if you're not careful, you could break your seedlings. And I just don't recommend that. What I would do instead is to get some potting soil and to fill cups or trays and go from there. Some options that you could do if you're a beginner is using some dollar store supplies. And the best thing that you should do is bottom water your plants. Now this is a tray that I just picked up from the dollar store. It does have a lid, but I would just toss that. You're not really going to use that. So you want a tray that you could put all your cups and things into, and you have a few different options for cups if you're going the dollar store route. I started off, people use the big red solo cups, and I honestly wouldn't do that because it's just a waste of soil. You don't need that much soil when you're starting seeds. Maybe if they're getting really big inside the house or wherever you're starting them and you want to pop them up, go ahead and put them in the big cups. But when you're first starting out, you don't need that much at all. So we have this size. This is just one package of 28 from the dollar store. It's this. This is the largest that I would recommend. So this one is a 9-ounce package from the dollar store, 9-ounce cups. This is really the biggest that I would start with. Even for commercial growers, they don't start off with this unless it's maybe a tomato, but even then, or like a watermelon or a squash that grow very quickly. Even this is a lot bigger than even I do in my greenhouse before I put it outside. So this is the biggest size you would need. I would recommend something more like this. So these are the drinking water cups that you usually use in your bathroom for rinsing your mouth, things like that. So any cups that you would use, you want to make sure that they have drainage holes. So if you're purchasing some cups from the dollar store, I would drill a hole in it. You can do 1 or 2. I'm going to go ahead and do 2. And the easiest way is to just keep them stacked and to use your drill and just go through the whole thing all at once. Okay. So I've drilled 2 holes and it didn't go all the way through. So I'm just going to go through, see how many it actually drilled. Oh. So that's about how much you can do with a drill at one time. So I'm going to do the rest of these. Okay, now all of them have 2 holes, and it's better to have 2 holes just in case one gets clogged. You just want to make sure that you have plenty of drainage, and since you're going to be bottom watering, you want to make sure that water can get up and inside the cups. Now I really like a tray that has a shorter side, so they do have trays in Tupperware that's much taller. If you're doing taller cups, maybe you might like that, but with this size it fits just fine. So when you're done, you can just fill your tray with your little cups, and this way, as you're transporting things and moving it from maybe one spot to the other, taking it out into the garden, you have a nice handy little tray and nothing too wobbly. Those trays that you get, the Jiffy trays, they're pretty flimsy, and if you hold it by one side, I've dropped the tray before. Very sad. You don't want to do this. This is actually quite sturdy, and you can actually bottom water with this, and they fit in here pretty well. There's no toppling. This is a really great setup. Now another option that they have at the dollar store that I hadn't seen until this year are these little 4-pack of cups. They come in all different colors. This would actually work really well for gardening. This is about the same size that I would use for a tomato. So this is a professional size cup. It's just a little bit smaller, but that's just fine. you would want to do the same thing as the paper cups and drill a hole in the bottom, and you could stack that inside your tray as well. Now here I have a container. This is a tray that you can put soil in, and you can bring it inside the house. You can do it outside on the patio, or I use it here in my greenhouse. You can fill it with soil, that way you don't make a big mess on the table. But I've honestly just taken a dollar store tablecloth, covered my table, made a big mess, and then swept up when I was all done. This helps to contain the mess. If you have a little bit extra in your budget, you can spring for something like this. But I've also used like totes for storage, to put all my soil in and to mix it up and get it the right consistency with water and soil. I've done that before. Honestly, any kind of 5-gallon bucket, anything you have around the house to put your soil in so you can work would do just fine. So to fill these cups in their tray, you could just take out one cup individually. Take your potting mix here and see how it's pretty wet. Some people say that you don't need it, so that when you squeeze it, nothing drips out. I've always done it so it's pretty drippy. It's worked well for me. If you have the drainage holes, any excess moisture is going to just fall out anyway. So you just do kind of an assembly line, pack it in so that there's no pockets of air in there. You don't want to stuff it so that it's really hard like this. You don't want to do that. Look at that. Yeah, that's way too stuffed. Look at that. All right, so you just want to kind of put it in gently, press down so that there's no air pockets, and go ahead and fill up all the rest that you have. Okay, so this is a good setup for the beginner, or if you don't have that many plants to plant out. This will do really well for you. The only thing about this is these aren't reusable cups. You will be throwing them away every year. You can reuse the bottom watering tray. If you did want something reusable year after year, that you can get plenty of trays online. I have some options here, and I've used them for a long time. There's a company called Bootstrap Farmer. These trays, if this was a chippy tray, that's not going to do that. I am pretty rough with my stuff. It hasn't lasted me as long as I had hoped. You can see there is some breakage and things. That's mostly because when I was getting them out, I took a butter knife and cut the sides of the walls, but it works really well. The thing about these trays that I don't like so much is you have to clean them. You want to make sure anything you're starting your seeds with is absolutely clean. Nothing from last year's seeds. If you are reusing something from the last year, you don't want any of that bacteria or fungus or mold to rehydrate and just start growing again the next year, because it will. The other thing I don't quite like about these trays is, I don't know, you can see all that. Those are spider webs, eggs, and gross dirt. This is a pain, just an absolute pain to wash. I hate it. That's the one thing that I really don't like about these. I use them if I have to. They're great for the first year because you don't have to wash them. But the second and third year, it just gets really, really old to wash them. So not my first choice, but if you are looking for something that you can use year after year for production style, this Bootstrap Farmer type of tray works really well. And it actually goes into a bottom watering tray. These are called 10 by 20s, and you can get different sized cells. This one's 128. You can get 72. You can get 50, and then you can also get a 38 size tray. That's what this one looks like. See, not clean from last year. I'll show you the back side. Look at that. That's a wasp nest, and I don't know. I like them, but I hate cleaning them. Anyways, well, in these, you have a tray that you could put these 2-inch pots into. I would rather just go with a bunch of these little cups and stick them in a nice size 10 by 20 watering tray if I needed a whole lot of them. products that I do like from Bootstrap Farmer are their mesh trays here. This is a 10 by 20, and their bottom watering trays. These are the ones that I feel like I go back to year after year. So after you have all your trays ready, you want to go ahead and label them. You have a couple of different options. You can get these plastic labels, garden labels from Amazon or online, or you can use popsicle sticks. Now, a permanent marker will write on both of these. I would use a permanent marker for the popsicle sticks if that's the way you want to go. But for these, a permanent marker will fade off within the next 2 months. Like, it's just awful to go back and you're like, I have no idea what this is because it's super faded and you have to get out your glasses to read what it is. Awful. I've been there before. So get yourself a garden marker. This will last a very long time, and it won't fade. So make sure that before you start seeding, you label all of your seedlings. So when you're getting ready to actually put your seeds into your cups, there's a couple of really helpful tools. One thing that I really like is a chopstick. So if you have seeds like tomato or peppers or something deep, you can just use a chopstick or even a pen and make little dibbles into the hole, whatever size you need. Drop your seeds in and then use the chopstick to cover it back up. So if you have really tiny seeds, like herbs have a lot of really teeny seeds. Can you see this? That's thyme. And I'd say there's at least 150, 200 seeds in there. Yeah, that's nearly impossible to see. So aluminum, you can see the dark seeds against them. You can also use like a kitchen ceramic plate. I just pour the seeds into here. Okay. Now these will conduct a lot of static electricity and they will jump around on you. So aluminum helps to fight that. You don't get static electricity in the aluminum. You can also take a like a salad plate, cover it with some foil, and it'll do the same thing as this little cup. Then you would just take a little toothpick, okay, and you can wet the end of it, honestly, with your tongue, or dip it in the soil that's already wet, or have a little cup handy. But I mean, I'm not afraid of a little dirt, so you just kind of lick the end, and you can pick up. Do you see how there's, I'd say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 seeds on the end of this little toothpick. And you just take this. When you've got the tiny seeds, you take this and then you just touch it to the soil. Right there. See, nothing left on the toothpick. And you can't even see that. So that's why you want to label your seeds beforehand. That way you know what it is. Now, one thing that a lot of you have seen me use in the videos is vermiculite. It's kind of, it looks like gold glitter. This, if you're going to purchase vermiculite, you can get it off of Amazon. And I would get the fine vermiculite. You can see it's like a little powder. You can get it really chunky, but for seed starting, you really want this fine stuff. Don't breathe it in because it can cause some damage to your lungs. So why would you use vermiculite? Well, some seeds need light to germinate, but they still need something helping it to stay in contact with the soil. You could press it down, and that does just fine. But the vermiculite, if you just sprinkle it just on the top, okay, just a tiny bit is all you need. It helps to prevent algae growth, and it helps to create a barrier. It's very absorbent, so it will absorb moisture, and if the soil gets dry on top, it will put that moisture back into your soil so that your seeds can germinate, because they will not germinate without enough moisture. So that's why I use vermiculite. And some seeds need light to germinate, some need dark. And so the ones that need light to germinate, I just put a fine dusting of the vermiculite light on there. It helps get a good contact with the soil. And, you know, there you go. Okay, so after you have all your seeds started, how do you water them? So with the bottom watering method, we don't actually put the water on top of our soil. So if you have tiny seeds like this thyme, when you're top watering, what could happen is that water and all the big droplets could displace the seeds, and where you put them, they could end up falling like really far down in the cracks and crevices on the sides. And that would mean that there's darkness for that seed and it wouldn't germinate because it needs light. So bottom watering helps to prevent some of those issues. Other issues you can have when you top water is not all leaves like to have excess water on them, and you can end up getting spots. They can get really wilty, and you can actually end up overwatering. So in order to bottom water these, you can just take, I have this, I think we got this from the dollar store. I don't know. They have tiny ones at the dollar store. And this one, I think we might have gotten them from a garden store here in town. You could just take this and pour water in the bottom of your tray here. So if you're starting your seeds indoors, this is actually a very great way to do it. Because as you're watering, you're not going to get anything on the floor. So this keeps it clean. And because you have those holes in the bottom, you could pour some water in here. See how there's just, I can't keep it level. There you go. There's just a little bit of water in there. Let that sit for about 10 minutes, okay? And the soil, if it needs the water, it will soak it all up. And you can see there's already a lot less water in there. So the soil has soaked it up and it will get what it needs. And bottom watering also encourages root growth. So instead of top watering and having all the roots kind of spread out on the top, it encourages the roots to really go deep down inside your soil cup to be able to get what it needs. Now, if there's, you'll have to experiment and make sure that you're not putting too much water in the bottom. You don't want the cups and the roots just sitting in the bottom. That will kill the roots and get them soggy. You'll end up getting rotting and like gnats and flies, things like that. So experiment with how much water you put in here. Try not to put so much. You might have to pour some out, which would be really annoying. So just pour out the excess water. You can't really do that once there's actual plants in here. So just make sure you're just putting just what they need. And honestly, do less. And if it needs more, pour more in there, and they can already soak up more. But if you see, don't know if you can see this, but this is already really wet and glistening up at the top. It soaked up all the water it needs. You really don't need to top water. So this here, these are cauliflower seeds. All brassicas look like this. Brassicas are like cauliflower, broccoli, kale, things like that. Brussels sprouts, they'll all have seeds that look like this. If you're using these little cups, I would put 2 or 3 of these into your soil. I would make a little divot here with your chopstick or your pencil, sprinkle them in. And then you could just take the dirt and then just push it right back over. Okay. You could take some vermiculite and put that back on top. Here's a pumpkin. This is a larger seed. So pumpkin seeds are much bigger. Squash, watermelon, they're all going to be about this size depending on the variety. So you can just make a little divot with your chopstick. Generally, you want to put it twice the size deep as the seed is. So put that in, push it down. Then you could just cover it with the soil. And add some little bit of vermiculite. And make sure you label. See? Another option for watering that I use a lot in the greenhouse, especially with soil blocking, is this little hose sprayer. This is just a gallon sprayer. You can use it for all kinds of things in the garden, for spraying any kind of pest control or fertilizer or just keeping seedlings moist while they're in the ground. I use this. It's a pump type sprayer. You just pump it, and if you see the tops just getting a little bit dry, you can also spray this. This isn't something I would use in the house, but I use the pump sprayer often, especially with soil blocking. But that's basically it if you are starting in trays and wanting to start on a budget. Now let's talk a little bit about the potting soil that you want to use. You want to use something like with a potting mix, something that has maybe vermiculite or perlite in it. You can use a coconut coir or a peat moss based potting soil. You want to stay away from something that's like a container type of soil. You can use compost if you want. But I would mix like maybe 50% compost and 50% peat moss if you're going to be seed starting, because you don't need straight compost in this. Make sure that you're sifting, because not all potting soil is made equal, and it has a lot of bark and other things in it. So make sure it's sifting. You sift it so that the soil is nice and fluffy. So this potting soil is sifted. Okay, the little rocks, that is perlite. Okay, this is what you want it to look like. And you don't have to be too picky about the starting medium. You just don't want straight peat moss or anything like that. Now, the next thing to think about is where are you going to put your seedlings once they're done? You need some kind of light source. There's a lot of different ways that you could do this. You can go with grow lights on some shelving inside. You could get a little mini greenhouse, like with the little zippered covers that you can just put outside. You can get them on Amazon. Make sure that if you're going to be using something like that and you're in a high wind area, that you stake it down either with strong staples, like sod staples, or with some sandbags. I use a greenhouse because I have lots of cats and they think that this is their litter box. So I can't start any seeds indoors. I wish I could. It just doesn't work for me. And I have the space. We're on 14 acres, so we built this greenhouse. It works out really well. You have to be aware of the temperatures inside your greenhouse. So if it's January or February, I wouldn't be starting my zinnias or my tomatoes. It's just way too early. It's because it's just too cold and I can't really regulate the temperature besides opening up the windows or closing the windows and putting shade cloth on. Now, if you're going to go with a grow light option, it's a really great option. Any shop light will work. I can link a link below of the ones that I used indoors and that I got off of Amazon. The one thing that I see a lot of people doing wrong is they have their seeds right here, and then their grow lights are like way up here. That doesn't really work. You get really, really leggy seedlings. Leggy means that they're really long and stretched, and you shouldn't have seedlings that look like that. They should be stout and short. When you have your lights, you want to make sure that you rig it so that the lights are always about 2 inches away from the tops of the plants. So if you are seed starting and nothing's come up, then you want to make sure that the lights are here. If the plants are about 2 inches tall, you want to move that light still so it's always only about 2 inches above the plants. And one of the last things that you would need for seed starting is some kind of fertilizer. I use a fish emulsion. It's really gross. It really stinks. The dogs like the smell and they try to eat the cap off. I got to it in time. But this is about what I used last year for my entire garden. This will last me 2 years, but I have a really, really large space. When you are watering your seedlings, this is a 2-gallon pail. I'll usually mix it up in here first. I only put like 2 teaspoons. You can follow the directions on your fertilizer, but make sure it's about half the strength of whatever they do recommend for mixing in with your water. And you can water it just the same as you normally do. Once your seedlings emerge, maybe about a week after that, you can start fertilizing. If you see there's some yellowing on your plants, it's either you've watered too much, you haven't watered enough, or you need more fertilizer, or you have too much fertilizer. It can mean a lot of different things. So yeah, but go ahead and make sure that you're fertilizing until they get out in the soil, and you can water about you can fertilize about once a week after you've begun with all of your plants. Let's talk about soil blocking next. What are some of the materials that you would need? I have here, this is a Ladbroke soil blocker. This is the Mini 20. This is what I use to start practically all of my seedlings. It has a little plunger. See, this has a little plunger where you can stuff your soil in here, put it on your tray, and stamp it out. The options you have after this, if you want to pot it up, there is a 1.5 inch and a 2 inch. Now, if you see, I was using this yesterday and it needs to be cleaned. Right here, you have the option of purchasing extra little blocks here. And when you have your soil blocks and you're ready to transfer it over, this is the same size as your soil blocks. So if you want to pot up, you have this larger size that the new soil block will just fit into like a little brick. And I mainly use the 1.5 inch. I don't really use the 2 inch size. Some of the other supplies that you'll need is a tray to be able to mix your soil in and make sure that you have a good hard contact with the bottom of your soil blocker. You don't want anything that has waves or ridges in it. Last year I used this big giant tote, just filled the wet soil into here, and it worked just fine, but it did give me an arm workout having to reach down inside and squish it around. I just didn't want to do that this year. So I have a nice shallow bin that'll hold the soil and keep it from getting to a big mess. It has a flat bottom where I can really push down and compact that potting soil into my soil blocker. I also like to have gloves because this is not the most comfortable tool in the world. My hands start to get a little bit sore and it presses into my palms. If I wear gloves while I'm soil blocking, that solves that problem for me. And a lot of other tools that I use for the trays or the cups, I also use for the soil blocking when it comes to seeding and watering and fertilizing. Now you have a lot of different options when it comes to trays for your soil blocks. I've used all different kinds, and the one that I think is the best for me is this long tray. I really like this long tray from Gardener's Workshop because when I'm soil blocking, I'm doing like 180, 60, 50 of each variety. One of the things that will determine the size of tray that you use is what kind of varieties you're going to be putting on this tray. So I wouldn't be putting like a tomato and rudbeckia on the same tray. A tomato is going to germinate within the next couple of days after you seed it, and rudbeckia is probably sometimes even takes like 3 weeks to germinate. Like mint can take up to a month, lavender can take up to a month, and if you put that right next to a seedling that, like lettuce, that comes up in the next couple of days, is ready to go out, that can cause problems when you're watering. When you're first watering your soil blocks and your trays, you want to make sure that you're keeping the topsoil moist enough that the seed can get water and swell, open up, and start to germinate. After they've germinated, they don't like the soil to stay super wet. You want the cups to get just a little bit dry before you water it again. And if you have two different types of varieties on your trays that germinate at different times, you'll have to keep one wet and you'll have to let one dry out. So the size of tray that you use will depend on what your production style is. If you're just a home gardener, I would use a much smaller tray, or make sure that you're putting all the same varieties on the one tray and not just using up all that space. So some of the other trays that I've used are, this mesh 1020 tray with the bottom watering tray from Bootstrap Farmer. Now there's lots of different generic brands on Amazon that might work out just fine. These mesh bottom trays on Amazon, and they're like 5 by 8.5. So if you're a home gardener or wanting to just try a few of them, that might be a better option for you. I do like the mesh bottoms for soil blocking. It works out really well. when it comes to watering the seedlings. You can also get some lunch style cafeteria trays for this, and this works out really well because if you have excess water that you have to pour off, the sides aren't very high. You want circulation for your soil blocks, and you want airflow, and the low sides work really well for that. So I wouldn't use anything that has really high sides when you're soil blocking if it doesn't have a mesh bottom. Another thing that I haven't used yet, but I want to try out, are these trays from the dollar store. These have these sides are a little bit taller than I like, so I don't know really how well it's going to do when it's time to tip the extra water out, and if you're just going to tip out all of your soil blocks. But I've seen a lot of people have a lot of success with these as well. So when you're soil blocking, this is the 1020 tray. You want to make sure that your soil is wet. You'd want it more on the wet side than the dry side. So this, because I can squeeze out some water, that's perfect for soil blocking. Even a little more wet is fine too. So you want to really stuff these. Don't be afraid to really compact these. That's what keeps the blocks together when you water them. If they're not stuffed enough, they're just going to end up just melting all over your tray. So don't be afraid to just really get in there. So I'm going to just take a little clump of soil, push down, see how I shake. Okay, you can also go like this, where you rock it side by side. So you can go rock one way and make sure you rock the other way to really be able to get in there. And you want to make sure when you're soil blocking that a little bit of water comes out. As you're soil blocking, when you start seeing water coming out, see how I'm really just getting in there? When you see water coming out, then you know that you've really packed it in there really good. For soil blocking, you also want some kind of scraper. I've seen people use the side of a potato masher. This is a bread scraper for sourdough. I have an extra one in the kitchen, so I brought it out here and it works really well. Get off that excess. So just take that scraper, scrape it along the bottom, and now you have a flat edge. You can see some of the grid lines. Then you're going to just take your tray, put it on your tray, and pull down on the lever, stamp a couple times, and you have your little forbidden brownie. So these are the 3/4 inch size. See this? These are pretty firm. See, I can pick it up. I'm squishing it pretty gently, but it's not coming apart. So when you're putting your next soil block on, if it's the same variety, you can go right next to the one that you just had and stamp it out. But if it's a new variety, you want to make sure that you have plenty of space next to it so you know what's what. When you're bottom watering, I can move these pretty easily. See, I didn't compact that one enough. It's already starting to fall apart. So I was being a little too quick. I would actually just take out this whole thing, toss it back, and redo it. When you're watering, you want to make sure that you have a narrow neck can like this. Don't do anything that has a wider mouth than this, because you want to pour the water on the side away from the soil block. If you put it right next to the soil block, it's going to start eroding. You see that whole block is just gone now. So you see how all the water is pooling around the soil blocks. You can put some water on, let it sit for about a couple minutes or so. And when you're watering, you want to make sure that you can see glistening on the top of your soil block. See how much water it already soaked up. And once you see that, you don't want to have water puddling in your tray. You want to just be able to get all the water to one side and pour it out. If you're doing this indoors, you can have a little bucket that you can pour this into. See how that started sliding away and melting? See, I didn't press this side as well as I should have. So you're going to have lots of melting if you don't do it properly. This one stayed put because it was nice and compact. Tools for actually seeding with the soil blocker is the same. You can use this little foil cup or a plate covered in tin foil, and you can also use the toothpick method with that, same as the trays. What I use often for seeding my soil blocks is this drop seeder. This is by Mindful Farmer. You can purchase this from his website, or you can also get it off of bootstrapfarmer.com. And you pour the seeds into this well, you shake it around, and all the seeds fit into the hole on the top plate. This is held together by two strong magnets, and it should sit, but I mean, it could shift, so make sure you're being gentle with it. You pour the seeds in, you sift it around, and the seeds are going to fall into this little hole. You position it over the soil block, and then you just press down, and those holes align, and the seed drops onto your soil block. So this is a really great tool. I don't think it's necessary if you're a beginner farmer, unless you think it's a lot of fun, because it's not cheap. So I do a lot of seeding. This saves me hours of work. This works great for a lot of different seeds, but it doesn't work great for small seeds like thyme or rudbeckia. I tried to seed and it just got really staticky. Feverfew is just impossible to seed with this because of the statics. So it works for larger seeds, but the teeny tiny ones, not so much if you get the static electricity. If you do, you can wipe it with a dryer sheet or a microfiber cloth to get that off. But honestly, I just use the toothpick method if I have trouble with it. So if you had your seeds on here, you would just place it over the block so that the bottom holes are lined up. The bottom holes are lined up with the soil block underneath. Okay, you wouldn't take this off when you're doing it. So you don't want to line up the holes where the seeds are. You want to line up the holes on the bottom one. And when it's lined up properly, you press that together. The holes are going to align and drop that seed. And when you go to the next soil block, you can keep the seeds. It has this little line here that you can kind of push the rest of the seeds to the top. After you've ejected the seeds, you can swirl it around again. More seeds will go in. You go to the next block over and over. Now, when you're soil blocking and you have seeds that need dark to germinate, you can't really put more soil on top like you would with the trays, and you can't really push the soil back over the seeds. It would ruin the blocks. So the option that you have when you are soil blocking to cover the seeds is the vermiculite. You can put this on heavy, or you can put it on light, as much as you might need the seed to grow. If you are using a larger seed like that pumpkin, that won't fit in here. So the pumpkin seed, I would stick with a 1.5 inch block. After I sow my seeds, I'll put on some vermiculite, and depending on whether or not it needs light to germinate, I'll just sprinkle just a little bit like that. Or if it needs more, then I'll put on more than that. You see it has little dibbles. You can see there's little indents in each of the center of each one. When you fill that with the vermiculite, it covers that up just like soil would. But the soil just isn't fine enough to do that, and then to be easily able to pull this soil blocks apart when it's time for planting. One of the things that you'll need to start seeds is seeds. So I'm going to give a list of some places that I've been to that I've had really great luck purchasing from. If you're doing vegetable gardening or flower gardening, all of these might work well for you depending on what you're purchasing. And My Gardener is my go-to for vegetable seeds and herbs. They have really great prices, great germination. They're a great company, excellent customer service. They're my number one. I also like Baker Creek. And if you're wanting to get in bulk or specialty seeds, Johnny Seeds is a great place, especially if you're doing like high production, need certain hybrids that are great for greenhouses, or then Johnny's would work really well for you. I've also picked up some seeds from the feed store if you're getting vegetables. Walmart has a pretty good selection. Big box stores like Home Depot, Lowe's, they'll also have a good selection. Trade Winds, that is a good place. I've gotten a few things. There's not a lot that I've needed to get from them, but they're also a good company. Hudson Valley is another great vegetable company. The dollar store has some good seeds too, so don't knock what they have. If you only need a few seeds, that's actually a great place to get started. You haven't had that much of an investment, and most of the seeds you can still get for $1. And the other place, if you're going to be growing flowers, is Geo Seeds. That's a really great place to get seeds. Really cheap wholesale prices. The one place that I bought seeds from before that I think I would never buy from again is Select Seeds. The germination, I was lucky to get 50% germination on some of those seeds. They were cheap, and I thought, oh great, I'd heard some other people like them, but I don't think I'll ever go to them again. Anyways, so I hope that this helps, and go ahead and leave a comment if you have any questions, and like and subscribe. We'll see you next time. Bye guys.